Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you're joining us from today. Thank you for joining us in the lounge. Today, my guest, Katherine, and I are going to be discussing how to get your wings, both in the sky, courtroom, or the boardroom. So, to kick us off, one of my favorite poets, Atticus, has this beautiful line: "What good are the wings without the courage to fly?" Katherine, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Great to see you again, Sarah. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly a very relevant topic right now, because we were just talking before we went live. We can have wings, we can do all these things to have the tools that we need, but we actually need the courage to use them. So I wanted to dive in and ask, why is this such a poignant topic for you? Why is this something you wanted to discuss with me today?
Okay, so I love the topic of courage. We have a Canadian definition for it. We have so I'm calling you from Toronto, Canada, and we have a national anthem, but we have another informal national anthem called Courage, which is gored downy in the hip, and the definition of a tragedy, courage being a tragedy, but that's the human dynamic, and it's the necessity of living with the consequences under pressure is the line,
Mm,
which I get. And then
mhm.
we talked a little bit about it and the mantra of dedication to integrity under facing extreme adversity, right? But courage for me, so I'm an advocate. I speak publicly, as do you. Love talking publicly, love talking to people. The
Yes.
bigger the stage, the most amount of people.
Yep.
It's
That's when we
amazing.
come to life.
The energy of talking and talking in a courtroom, talking in a boardroom, which can sometimes be more nerve-wracking, talking in on a flight deck to air traffic control, speaking. But I got my start in talking probably age 10 or 11, and I had a very significant speech impediment.
Okay.
And can't hear it anymore, but it has to do with how I process audio, just a little bit different, and it manifests itself with a speech impediment. And so I'm a young kid, and so through speech language pathology and therapy, one of their tasks are, okay, you're going to go out in front of your grade 4, 5, 6, grade 7 class and do a talk in front of everybody. And that's how I got my start in public speaking, through a disability. And I don't remember all my speeches, but I remember the first two. So the first one was about bubble gum, and I have a distinct memory of talking about the law in Singapore. So this is now
Yes.
going back into law and not chewing gum. So I was like
Yeah.
maybe 11 when I'm talking about bubble gum. And then my second speech was about the fear of public speaking. And I'm about 11, 12, still with a speech impediment. But I do distinctly remember, I don't remember what I wrote, but I remember the quote that I said in the speech is the only thing you have to fear is fear itself, which, famous, politician quote. And
Right.
so then I think of that thread throughout my own life of seeking out challenges and trying to act courageous like in adversity. And that has led to a whole bunch of remarkable life experiences, and finding the best medicine for anxiety, the best medicine for imposter syndrome, challenging myself to learn how to fly an aircraft. I have not done skydiving yet. I don't know about,
Oh, I
well,
love it.
entrepreneurship is skydiving in a
It is.
proverbial way,
You're in a
right?
free fall all the
All
time.
the time. Yeah.
It doesn't end.
You're jumping out of the airplane while you're building an airplane to get back in is the
Right,
entrepreneurial journey.
basically.
So, and that thread of courage and what does it mean, and looking myself in the mirror, knowing no matter the fear that I faced or the uncertainty
Mm,
of sitting in front of first time going solo, first time learning how to fly, first time going into a court of appeal and making submissions, first time in front of a jury, first time in front of a boardroom, there's those nerves, and I always feel a sense of excitement. If I didn't, then I wouldn't care.
mhm.
And that thread throughout my whole life. So I love the topic of courage. I think more, and everyone has it. Just have to figure out how to tap into it.
Oh, yes, I love that, and thank you for giving me the Canadian definition.
Yeah.
I also like this acronym that I came across. FEAR is just false evidence appearing real.
Mm.
And I appreciate your sentiment of everybody has courage, because everybody does. It's just sometimes we bury it under a bunch of other nonsense. And we have to go hunting for it, right? Or we have to turn on the flashlight and go look in that dark corner that we haven't checked for a while because it might just be right there. And this is how we fly. And in aviation, one of my favorite quotes, or maybe not even quote, but sayings that I have heard time and time again, particularly during COVID, was that airplanes take off against the wind. And so it's just a reminder that without that resistance, without the drag, we actually wouldn't have lift. And so we can use that to reframe, all the situations. Have you come across Jocko and his video Good?
No, I don't know that one.
Like,
Okay.
honestly, every time I watch this video, I think he was, I don't remember which military branch he was in. Don't want to get it wrong, but he has this video and it's about a minute and a half. And he basically goes through all these things. He's like, didn't get the job you wanted? Good. You broke your leg.
Mm.
Good. Now, and he goes through this whole narrative. And every time I watch it, I get goosebumps. I feel like my adrenaline going. I'm like, I can do anything right now. Where's a rope for me to climb? Like, what's some hard task I can do? Like, put some extra weight on the bar. It really pumps me up. But there's also a very old tale that is, this farmer and his son. He lives in a village, and that everyone around you is going to always judge what your experience is, right? And it's like, oh, you had such a great crop, wow, that's so lucky, or that's so good. And he's like, yeah, we'll see. And then, like, everything that happens, it's like a good thing happens, a bad thing happens, and it keeps going back and forth. And so he says, we'll see each time, not choosing to look at it as a good or bad thing. And it's just always how we move through life and how we face things, and what we do in the moment. And we shouldn't let what other people tell us is good or bad affect how we experience something.
That's actually very poignant. And if you see something as a negative, like train your mind or think about, that's a redirection.
Yes.
Stuck at a light longer, it just saved you from a car accident.
Right.
Didn't get that job you wanted, praise the universe, because you would have been out in 6 months. You need the other job. And that mindset shift, like, to get to that point requires a bunch of failures too.
Absolutely.
And I called failures, like, not my word. There's an individual named Mathieu Parr, who's a director with Rolls-Royce, and he talks about Rolls-Royce Electric, and they talk about engineering philosophies, and it's graceful failure. I mean, now I also have like these little failures, and I freak out about it, and I'm like, I'm going to get judged, everything's over. But then the learning opportunity in graceful failure, and if more people embrace graceful failure and the opportunities and learning from them, getting rid of that fear of failure, it just opens up remarkable doors.
Absolutely. Failing forward, here's another
Yeah.
acronym. I love wordplay, and I love just, using that to reframe our experience, because how we perceive the world is through the language we use, right? And things that we understand. But it's really just our attempts in learning. And just like any science experiment, just like anything that you're testing, right? You introduce a new variable, you test it. If it works, great. And if it doesn't, on to the next thing, right? It doesn't mean anything other than that. And so we can use that to remind ourselves, like, nothing is permanent. And we get this opportunity to play and to figure out what feels good, and also keep retesting, because maybe
Yeah.
what felt good last year or 6 months ago or yesterday is not what feels good today.
Yeah. And this lesson, that broad lesson, first attempt in learning, like, more young girls in STEM need to hear it. I was at
Yeah.
a Canadian Law Tech conference, and there was a coder up there, and she was talking. She was one of very few women that were coding, and she was talking about the men will get the challenge, the boys will get the challenge, and they won't get it, and they'll keep persevering. And the girls are still interested in it. They're like, I keep failing. It's not meant for me. Now, if
Mm,
you keep failing and you still feel it's meant for you, go on. Sometimes that's truly a redirection. It's not for you. But that mindset, and we were talking about before we got on, we're very much trained and socialized, stay in a very specific lane.
right.
And then we go into another lane and we're challenged and we love it and we're failing. We're like, oh, guess society's got me right. I got to go back in this lane. But that's not true. That it's the joy and beauty in the failure. Now I'm going to knock on wood. I don't have any crazy failures. I want little graceful failures of learning, but not having the fear of, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, but at least try. And then if
Absolutely.
you do it and you go through that fear, you move through that fear, then the next scary thing pops up. And that the universe acts in the weird way. They give you a challenge and you conquer it, and then it's like, seen it all, the worst is over, and then something else happens, and then something else
Absolutely.
happens. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's never over. And it's really building a muscle. I think
Mm.
that is certainly the thing that people don't focus on when it comes to change. And we kind of go through a mental exercise or an intellectual exercise around the changes that are most often spoken about, such as graduation, um, changing jobs, getting a promotion, starting a family, getting married, divorce, birth, death, these major life events. We have ritual, we have story, we have an expectation of what happens in those things. But it's these smaller changes that are very nuanced and that are often happening. I mean, they're happening every single day, right? You're switching between different roles. You're a mother, you're also a business owner, you're also a chief of staff, you're also a daughter, you're also, and the list goes on. And those are the muscles. It's kind of like at the gym when you want all the boring work is what gives you the foundation to
Mm.
do the really cool back handspring or, some wild 2-minute handstand. But nobody wants to do the boring work because it's not sexy. And yet that's exactly what we need.
There's a lot of boring work that goes into becoming a successful lawyer. There's a
I'm
lot of
sure.
manuals that you have to read to become a qualified pilot. I'm a mom, and that's a slog too. A lot of background work that you don't get to see. You see the joy at like the hockey game or the school play, but they don't see all of the other stuff.
Right.
And that's also a bit of a generational shift too. The amount of hard work, the amount of work even on advocacy or writing that goes in. Um, I think back when I'm not litigating anymore, but if I was litigating in court, it would be several hours of work for 5 minutes of talking time.
Yeah. Well, it's
Mm.
it's not even it's not just in litigation. It's in a keynote.
Mm.
Yes, you're on stage for 45 minutes, but the kind of the average preparation time is 1 hour of rehearsal for 1 minute of keynote. I was a figure skater growing up. I had a 2.5-minute program. I would train for months and hours every week, like 30 plus hours a week. It was a full-time job on top of my school to train for that 2.5 minutes at whatever competition I was going to. But that's how you become able to do those things at mastery level, at
Yeah.
a level of excellence. And these days everybody wants the shortcut.
And that doesn't, you have to fall in love with the training. You have to
Yes.
fall in love with the process of it. And then you get there's that story of Olympians and they get to the Olympics and then they're like, oh, now what? Because the
Right.
process is so incredible. Um, and if you don't find joy in the process and you're failing, then that's a signal, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. And sometimes, I certainly, we tend to avoid the things we don't like and the things we're not good at. I I clearly remember when I was way less emotionally able to regulate myself or as wise as I am, which is not very wise, having playing tennis with my ex-husband while we were on a holiday and getting so frustrated that I sucked that I
Mm.
threw the racket and stormed off the thing. And I look back at that now and I was like, I literally threw a tantrum. I literally was 2 years old throwing a tantrum because I wasn't good at something when I had literally never picked up a racket since I was 10 years old. So how could I possibly expect to be like able to do this sport just because I did CrossFit or whatever? And so I can laugh at myself now, but at that time, I remember I was like embarrassed. I probably had a red face. I just was like, I don't want to talk about it. It's like a big deal. But if we can learn to be okay with sucking at something, because you're going to suck the first time you do anything. Like that's just how it works, right? If you've never done it before, sometimes you're savant, sometimes you're lucky, but that's going to be one thing. Everything else, the first time you touch it, it's not going to feel great. And that's okay.
Oh, I look back at some of my writing samples when I started out and I'm like, oh, horrified at what I thought was a good standard. And then I know future me in 5 years, I'm going
Yeah.
to look back at this and be like, okay,
Uh-huh.
You could have done a lot better.
What were you doing?
What were you doing? You
Yeah.
should have said this. You should have said that. That also to me is, a sense that you care. Tennis is a good example because I'm not good at tennis at all, and I'd probably throw a tantrum. I, I like golf, but I'm terrible at golf. But then I enjoy the process.
Right.
And
Yeah.
enjoy the process of law, learning of flying, learning the challenges. And then if I don't enjoy the process, I was like, I can't make it work. And I get upset. I have an internal tantrum. And then I'm like, this
Mhm.
is the redirection. And that limbo time, that's the hardest. So you cut your losses on something, on a failure. This is a redirect. You know that it's opening the universe for something new or amazing, a new opportunity, a new relationship, whatever. But that limbo, that interim period, that liminal space that you have to work
Mm.
through is when you really have to focus in on yourself and learn of the lessons of the failure. That's very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And like, if I'm going to avoid I'm not avoiding the failure. I'm avoiding the liminal space that comes after the failure that I don't want to deal with myself. I have to deal with myself to get better. And then once I'm better, then the next amazing opportunity comes. And see, that's my dog. She agrees, Tilly. I
I
know you
love
have a
it.
dog with you too. So
Yeah, she was chewing her bone, like, right on the edge of the desk. I don't know if anyone heard that at the beginning, but, I had to, like, kind of nudge her with my foot because she started to move the desk, and that's her way of saying, like, "Mom, you should stop your podcast and come play with me." So, as much as I would love to be a full-time Doberman dog mom, that's not quite what my path is. So, um but I really love what you said there about the liminal space. And what I'm hearing from you is also that when we are looking at, no matter whether the endeavor is flying an airplane, being a lawyer, going up the corporate ladder and joining a board of directors or starting your own business, it's really about having the courage to suck at something,
yeah,
the courage to not know what you're doing and ask for help, and the courage to laugh at yourself and be willing to learn rather than trying to pretend that you have it all together and you know exactly what to do.
I agree. And laughing at myself or being vulnerable or making mistakes and shows my team that they can do it as well. There's too many people who put up a facade of, I know everything, I'm great. I had a really wonderful mentor early on in law, and she was from another law firm. And I remember doing a talk on transportation, and I remember watching the panels. And at that time, the diversity conversation hadn't started, and there's a lot
Mm,
of males. Like, there wasn't you're fit for the role, but there was panels always all men, and on transportation there wasn't a lot of women. And I would watch the men come up and they would speak with so much bravado, and it's like they owned that space, they belonged there. And I was probably early 30s at this time, and I'm thinking, how did they get that? Like, how do I? And then I realized they're faking it. Fake it till you make it. They're all fearful, and that was a light bulb moment for me. And then I realized if they're like that, everybody in your corporate environment is like that, is having that feeling. And you have to have some ego and bravado to do your job and be successful. But when you have that knowledge, then that releases something in you. Be open
absolutely.
to, I don't know what's going on. And if you're vulnerable, then other people will be vulnerable too. And and that creates innovation and progress.
Absolutely. Giving people the permission
Mm,
to not know the answer or to do something different or to just be different is an extremely powerful act of service. And as you know too from working in the space of being on stage, the fake it till you make it, it's you can deliver a good speech if you are faking it and you are kind of like masking this fear, but when you actually become honest and you are speaking from that place of vulnerability and you're not worried about yourself, you're worried about how you deliver this experience to the audience and it's in service of them and their learning, that's when true transformational
yeah.
moments occur. That's when people connect to you because you're human, right? And they feel something. And when people feel something, that's when they take action. I definitely lived many years of my life just intellectualizing, and theorizing about things, but not really feeling very numbed out,
Mm,
overworking, over busy. It was a good excuse to not face any of that stuff. But guess what? it's still there when you are not busy. So that's why we stay in these cycles of busyness and overwork.
That's true. Not wanting to deal with, you're pushing the failure, the risk, or the liminal space aside. Just
Right.
on to the next thing, on to the next thing. Eventually, I guarantee anyone who's doing it, it will come crashing down.
Oh,
It's
absolutely.
just a matter of when. Um,
It's like being a motorcycle rider. It's
mm,
not if you lay down the bike, it's when you lay down the bike. And it may not have anything to do with you. It has to do with external circumstances outside of your control. And so when you acknowledge that and you can approach it from that perspective, then you are able to take different action, right? Because you're choosing from a place of power rather than this place of avoidance. And that liminal space is so required. It's how we process, it's how we think. We don't have a society of deep thinkers anymore.
right. So busy on the phone.
TikTok,
Next, yeah.
20-second videos, right? Like do you remember dial up? I think
Like,
that was
yeah.
that should be just for any child being born now, parents, you should make your children just like stare at a static image for 5 minutes and play that sound
Yeah.
so that they can get some character and some patience because I used to go make a snack and then all I could do was like instant message my friends on, AOL Instant Messenger.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember that? And it would take
Yeah.
like sometimes 3 minutes for a web page to load. Now, if that web page doesn't load in like 3 microseconds, we're annoyed.
Right. That's the fear of dealing with oneself and
Yeah,
the shadow and all of the difficult stuff, and that not we are deeply flawed human beings and we don't like to look at our own flaws and struggles. But if you do, therein the light. Those are the lessons. And I years of perfectionism and working really hard, and then things came crashing down. And I wouldn't wish, my series of experiences on certain people, but I'm internally grateful that I went through them,
yeah.
and now incredibly strong and open, and the
Mm.
freedom that comes when you get that lesson. And it's not a little lesson, like it comes and it wallops you. And sometimes if you don't get it, it wallops you again. And then you're like, I got it, universe, I got it. Um, and then after that, and the fear of dealing with that, like people hold back, or fear of change, live a life of anxiety or diversion, or not challenging themselves to do something. They're just postponing the inevitable. And I feel like the inevitable is getting energy, and it's going to get even bigger and more powerful. It's going to happen. It's a matter of when. So if anyone's
Absolutely.
listening, they're like, oh, I live a blessed life. It's not happening. It's never happened. It's coming for you.
It is.
And Sarah and I will be here to support you in that journey.
We will catch you. We will be the soft cushion to help you on that graceful
Graceful failure.
descent. Yes.
Yes, the graceful descent.
Yeah. No, it's so true because we have stories from our society, from our culture, from our upbringing, our own stories that we adopt. One of our listeners is saying it happened to him last year.
Mm.
It certainly happened to me. And I was at one point like this unicycle rider with like 50 spinning plates. And it was like, wow, look at me. Look, isn't this fucking amazing? And it was to any observer, but it was also like, how are you doing that? When is it gonna when is it gonna come crashing down? And I actually just reconnected with a friend of mine who she knew me from my days back in Asia. We met in 2018, 2019, around that time frame where I was at the height of my then corporate career and also the height of my perfectionism and like I have to prove myself. And, now I talk about slowing down and I, live this by example. And I'm a very different person. No is my favorite word. Do you want to have a Zoom call? No, thank you.
Mm.
Whatever I can do by email, let's do it by email. But
Mm.
uh or not. Let's have a quick phone conversation, 5 minutes, but not a 30-minute Zoom call. And she made a comment to me because we're now starting to do some work together. And she said, "Yeah, you used to try to be all things to everyone, and you can't do that, can you?" And I was like, "Nope." And she's been following my journey, and so to get that reflection from her to someone who I also thought I had fooled, right? Because basically you fool nobody but yourself in the end, right? Everyone else can see through your BS. And then later, once you acknowledge that, it just makes it even stronger when you can stand from that place of like acceptance and self ownership. But sometimes we have to feel it a little bit more. My friend in Hong Kong gave this example of the dog on the rusty nail. And so imagine you come over to my house and Sass is just laying on the porch and she keeps fidgeting and she keeps moving and you're like, what's wrong with her? Why can't she just relax? And I was like, oh, she's lying on top of a old rusty nail. And I was, well, why doesn't she just move? And it's because it doesn't hurt enough yet. So very often we are just content to make micro adjustments and move just a little bit so
Mhm.
that we don't feel it. And then it comes again, and then we move again just a little bit, but we're constantly having to do that adjusting. And it's not until we get tired of that and it actually punctures the skin that we're like, oh, okay, I got to move.
Yeah.
Uh,
And what you talk about people pleasing, I mean, every young girl is sort of raised in that environment. We do
Mind you.
it. But it's the opposite of what's required because we do it to show our value, but really our value comes with boundary setting.
Oh,
Our
absolutely.
standards raised when you put the boundaries up and you say, I'm very much send it to me by email, no to phone calls. I love Zoom, but um, I start putting those boundaries in place. And it took me, like I didn't start doing that until into my 40s. So it took me a long time to realize, no, I have to be in service to myself first
Right.
and then I can be in service to others. And
Yeah.
that also when it hits the fan and that nail punctures, it's bad. And then you have to go through that learning environment, that change, that transformation. And then someone says when you're going through that, you will pivot and
Mhm.
realize service to others. Service to yourself and service to others is the focus. And that light is once that light lights up, there's no going back. And then all of a sudden, when you start living that authentic path, amazing things happen. You start seeing the signs, you start being able to read things that you were blind to before. People numb it through gambling or alcohol or drugs or spending or bad habits, phone. They numb themselves so they're not, you know, blind until they can see. And you
Right.
sometimes really have to hit that wall a couple of times before you do. Grateful for the experience.
Yes. Yeah. Actually, yesterday or this morning, I shared something about, thank you for the hard moments. Like I
Mm,
have gratitude for those hard moments because, yes, they suck,
yeah.
but they also allowed me to process what I needed to process and get here. And this is another reason why I enjoy doing hard things, why I willingly, sign up for tier two fun, like a Tough Mudder,
Oh,
or go to, a hard, heavy workout. Because I tell you something, when you go and lift some heavy weights, and then you've got some silly little thing that comes up in your day, it doesn't even bother you. You're just like, whatever, I can do this. Like, I did that this morning. I can definitely deal with this, right? You just have a different attitude towards the things that are occurring and they have less charge, and that is what I realized. I'm not seeking happiness, I'm not seeking the thrill. Of course those things are great, but what I actually desire in my day-to-day experience is peace. And so the more I can get to that, the more I can get to like a less charged experience, the better it is for everybody involved, right? Because then you're not swinging between the extremes.
and you've picked some big challenges, I know. I know you're in the space market. I was like,
Yes.
aviation's tough. Space is, I know we're connected through aviation,
Yes.
but and aviation is scary for some because it's a tough market and very traditional, but that's changing
Yeah.
drastically. And
Very
then
much so.
now you're going into space. I was like, whoa, that to me is like I'm interested in space for policy reasons because the
Yeah.
policy for low level altitude flying and advanced air mobility, there's like things that we can learn and impart for the space, but what a time to do it. And I think I messaged you at some point. I'm like, you talking about the space park, and I'm like, no, we need more women voices. We have women leader
Absolutely.
voices in space, and it's tough to get in. Um, it's still in aviation, still the old boys club mentality still
Mhm.
exists, but there's so many doors open. They're opening all the doors. They're like, please come in. We understand
Yes.
the errors of our way. We're way stronger with you coming in and
Yeah.
noticing things that we didn't do. It's great for business. There's so much good
Absolutely.
business. So
Yeah.
there's risks and rewards and opportunities and some of the biggest challenges.
Well, and that's the thing is the fact that there are not that many women and the doors are opening now because of a variety of reasons, um, means that there are more opportunity for women. And you can pivot into the industry at any point, at any time, no matter what your experience level is. I mean, people often forget the argument is the same for aviation as well as aerospace, as well as finance, tech,
Mhm.
dentistry, construction, all the things. We need marketers, we need finance people, we need accountants, we need salespeople, we need HR, we need business strategists, we need consultants, we need coaches, we need communicators, we need people who can drive change and get people on board. We don't just need engineers and rocket scientists and fighter pilots, right? Yes, we need those things, but that's not all we need. And so there's so much opportunity, and it's a really exciting time. I mean, for those of you who are in space, the news right now is Jared Isaacman was just appointed deputy chief, I think is the title of NASA, right? So he's the first non-NASA person to be in that position. There's a lot of very, very exciting things happening in the space industry. And we definitely need more women. I went to an event last night where I was maybe one of 10 or 15 women out of over 200. And this event was like the tail end. It was a technology showcase for aerospace and defense. And, most of the women were engineers and all these really awesome positions, but there were not many of them. And it was really interesting. So obviously, you stand out more, but that gives you a great opportunity to talk to people and to see what's happening. And, I'm not an engineer, I'm a speaker, but communication is important. And a voice, you could be the smartest engineer in the room. If you cannot communicate your
Yep.
idea, it's not going to be built. You're not going
Yep.
to get funded. It's not going to happen. Right. And that is actually where space and aviation to a large extent, but space, especially because of policy, because we need, the public's basically okay with it. Right. We can't have like outcries over what we're doing. We need to have a narrative, and there needs to be a consistent narrative, and it needs to show like, why is this important? One of
Mhm.
my favorite companies there yesterday, they also build affordable housing here on earth, and they're looking at how to build on the moon using local materials, because you can't send a whole 3D printer or a whole like crane up on a rocket
Right.
right now. It's
Right.
just not feasible. It's too expensive.
Right.
So what would you say for young women who
Mm.
are wanting to come into, whether it's aviation or law or aerospace, any STEM field? What would you say to them, and what would you say to their parents?
Ooh, that's a great question.
Yeah.
The first thing, well, we go back to courage, and for the young person coming in, be like, it's the courage to ask the questions. So
Mm.
think about your engineering example, and and like the engineer has this brilliant idea, but not able to communicate it. The way a communicator would come in is they have to have the courage to ask, to be vulnerable and ask the engineer the questions to understand. So talk to me about quantum mechanics as though I'm in grade 8. If you're an engineer and you know your quantum mechanics, if you can't explain it to me like I'm in grade 8, you don't understand your craft.
Correct.
I work with a brilliant engineering team with our airline, and they take things down to the bare bones so I can understand the bigger picture.
Mm.
And it makes me really comfortable. So they're willing to be very, very vulnerable with me. Sorry, she gets really
That's
excited.
okay. She's
So
like,
that,
yeah, that's great.
yeah, 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 I agree. I agree with engineering. um, for for young women, it's the first initial questions. If you're a young woman and you're thinking about flying or law, or sorry, I'm just gonna shut her out. Now she's like, not for you. if you're if you're thinking of a challenge that you want, the first thing is to meet the people who are doing it and ask the questions. And the ones that like will embrace it are like, we've been waiting for you. If they don't embrace it, that's the wrong environment for you.
Yeah.
It's the wrong people. And if it's aviation, if it's helicopter, if you go into helicopter rotary and you're like, I don't feel it, then maybe it's fixed wing, maybe it's gliding, maybe it's maintenance,
Or
maybe it's
advanced
flight
air
attendant.
mobility,
Or
right?
advanced air mobility is like, we'll
Yeah.
talk a lot about that. That is like, and that's another, so parents too, if they're thinking about aviation and they come in and it's like male dominated, it's my child is going to be discriminated against.
Mm,
There is a whole wave of the industry that's changing and embracing. And I like advanced air mobility to me is on like ESG for aviation on steroids.
mm,
It is, well, I think about in Canada, our country expanded with aviation 1919, but at that time, cisgendered heterosexual white men of privilege designing for their own type, learning lessons, not engaging with the indigenous communities, not engaging with elderly or women or children or those who have accessibility needs. Technology coming in advanced air mobility, particularly propulsion-based technology, challenging the way we think about mobility at a time when it's young people coming up who have different sentiments about inclusion, about it's the operationalization of ethics
mm,
into aviation. And we are all now have an opportunity to redress the harms of the past through technology, through policy, through mobility. How do we get, you know, Black, brown, Asian women, LGBTQ comfortable in a space? And it's the young leaders who are coming up in advanced air mobility, looking at our skies differently.
mm,
And 1919 aviation, and then really took off because of war in both our countries. So we saw an emergence of technology in response to conflict and hatred.
mm,
Whereas advanced air mobility is not in response to, I mean, it is being used in conflict, but the technology that's being created is for the environment. It's for noise. It's for comfort. It's
mm,
for equality. So here we're seeing like this new wave of aviation. Um, it's challenging the traditional norm. So if I'm a parent of a young person, this is exactly the time that you want to get into aviation and aerospace. Like there's no lend your voice for the greater good. And I always say like AV, advanced air mobility, people gravitate to eVTOLs, electric vertical takeoff and landing. That's sort of the
right.
sexy technology. There's so much other, it encompasses so much more. When they say, oh, eVTOLs, I say, okay, flying cars. It's controversial to say. It's like, I'm in the flying car
Mm,
business. But in order to get the flying car business, the AAM, the low level altitude flying, regional or urban, doesn't matter. It requires effective collaboration and communication between all levels of government. So state, provincial, municipal, federal, everyone's got to collaborate. So if everyone collaborates, we're going to have flying cars, we're going to have advanced air mobility. What also are we going to have when everyone effectively collaborates? It's world peace, right? So no pressure on the AAM market, but it's peace between nations and borders,
Mm,
and it's a very delicate balance because it can cause some harm in any new
yeah.
technology, but it's the paving the way for something absolutely incredible in greater service to others. So if there's a family who's thinking about having a young person in their family going into aviation aerospace, now is the time to invest, because next 50 years
Absolutely.
they're going to leave a legacy. Right?
Mm,
Very positive one. So that's what I
yeah,
would say to parents.
I
And the
love it.
girls, I would like young girls, I'd be like, just the courage to ask the questions.
Yes, asking the questions, absolutely. And, it's okay if you don't know the answer, even if you are in that field, right? You might be in a completely different section of that field. Um, and I agree with your statement that if you cannot explain it to me like I'm 8 years old and I won't understand, that means you don't know it well enough. And, it's like the bumper sticker rule. Can you explain it to me like it was bumper sticker? And that's a great way for us to also look at what we think we know in our lives, because a lot of us think we know a lot, and then we start to learn that we don't know a lot, right? And so this what we know kind of starts to shrink because we start to have awareness around what we don't know. But this is it's an opportunity for you to practice that with your spouse or with your family members or with your siblings, your friends, and see if you can explain a concept to them in a
And
way that is not so wordy and that they can understand.
you shouldn't have I think about my first flight instructors too. And you sit in the flight deck. I remember not so much gliding, but I distinctly remember sitting in a powered aircraft, and this is like a very simple like what Cessna 150, like as easy
Okay.
as you can get, right?
Yeah.
And I remember sitting there at when I was 17 or so, and I'm like, there's no way. I'm not going to be able to figure this out. But there also is the patience and confidence of the person sitting beside me. If I'm not asking the questions, then they're like, do you know what this does if you pull it, right?
Right.
They keep asking that, and like every single pilot on the planet, I don't care if they say otherwise, they had the same feeling I did when they sat in front of whatever equipment it was.
Yeah.
They may not admit it, but I know all of you. You sat in front of there like, you're switching from an Airbus to a Boeing. You sit in there like, oh, there's everyone. I was like, there is no way I am going to figure that. But you do. You ask the questions. Everyone had to start from scratch. Everyone failed. Um, and that's the grunt work. That's the gym work that you don't see. Everyone has to go
Absolutely.
through it. And do you have the courage to continue on, or do you have the courage to cut your losses when you're like, I'm failing and I'm not enjoying the process?
That's the other thing. I'm so glad you brought that up because it's one thing to have courage to face the hardship and to keep going, but it is also an extremely courageous act to say, this is not for me. And instead of trying to keep up with a pretense
Mhm.
of, oh, I must do it because I selected this 5 years ago or because told everyone I was going to do it. No, you don't have to. You are under no obligation to be anything other than who you need to be right now. And if that's no longer in alignment or you're not enjoying the process, then that's okay. Pivot.
That
Take
and it's sometimes it's scarier to cut than it is to chase a dream. Like
Yeah,
if you're moving, that's scary. If you're changing jobs, that's scary. But the walking away, knowing that you're doing it in your full strength and your full authenticity. And I also do have this, although I have not followed this advice that I get, it's worked out. So maybe it's not good advice, but I always say when I sort of younger women coming into law and thinking about moving around, I said, well, if you're moving jobs, always move when you're doing well or you're feeling comfortable. The most uncomfortable time to go to a new role is when you're feeling top of the world at your own position, because then your ladder is automatically moving up. If
right.
you're feeling down in the dungeons and you're like, ah, this is not good, you're going to pick your next opportunity that doesn't match. However, I would also say, like I left a previous very good role into nothing, into an abyss. And this was another woman who gave me this advice. I flew in Iowa, so we know International Aviation Women's Association, so we're connected. So I was in Paris alone, trying to understand advanced air mobility and build my connections. And I resigned from a long-standing position of 17 years into nothing. I'm like, well, I'm going to build my own company. And I've got two kids. I got to put food on their table. I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And then Iowa was meeting in Amsterdam, and any opportunity to go AMS, I'll love it. I love AMS as the airport and KLM, and love Amsterdam. And they were all meeting there, and I'd resigned, and I'm like, this is like, I had a couple of crazy experiences at the Paris Air Show. And then I'm like, I'm doing a quick hop over to Amsterdam to go to this meeting. And I go into the meeting, it's about 80 women, and I sit down. Maria Lane, so she's the president of Boeing for UK, Ireland, and Nordic regions, and she's talking. And she said something. She won't like it because it wasn't as eloquent, but the meaning was there. And I'm sitting there in the front row, and she says, "Ladies, if you're not throwing up, you're not doing it right." And she's like, don't quote me on it. I'm like, now I'm quoting her all the time because I'm sitting there and I'm like, Maria, I've been throwing up for 72 hours between Paris and Amsterdam. I can't believe I've just upended my life. I've got no financial net. I don't know what I'm going to do. I've cut this. We went out for lunch after. And that story and that timing. And I was like, as hard as that was, I knew I was going to be on the right path, because otherwise, why would the president of Boeing UK be telling me the exact story in front of a whole bunch of women that I needed to hear at that moment?
Right.
And so that's the finding the light in these really challenging situations, is making those cuts and standing truth. And I'd be like, I don't know what's going to happen. That's skydiving a little bit in the entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah.
And then someone said, when on the entrepreneurial side, you do something scary, but something scary is just around the corner,
Right.
right? Um, and if you do it, and if you pay attention, the signs in the universe will line up, and they will tell you that you're on the right path. And then I also feel like if you feel anxious or something, that's like you're not paying attention to your intuition.
Mm.
So we talk about powers and superpowers, and we all have it. Women have strong intuition. It's built into our DNA. And then I always feel like and I am a very low anxious person generally. And if I ever feel that anxiety creeping, I was like, oh, I'm not listening to my inner voice.
Mm.
That's the warning. It's a difference, right? Like there's
Yeah.
the natural fear that comes with exhibiting courage, or your dedication to integrity in the face of adversity. That's something different. Anxiety is you're not listening to who you are.
Mm.
So,
Yes. And so many of us have just been taught to override those signals
right.
and
Doubt
to
ourselves.
ignore them. Yeah, self-doubt. I mean, I was a competitive athlete growing up, and so you literally ignore what your body's telling you to continue training and push past the point and
Mhm.
like go for the thing. How many times have you been at your desk and you've just not had a drink of water all day, or you've not gone to the bathroom in 8 hours? All of those things. And so
Mm.
learning how to get back in touch with this is a process. What would you recommend people do? What's some of the things that have helped you get in touch with your intuition when you find yourself off
Ooh.
track? And maybe back in the beginning, if you were really ignoring it, what would you say for those people that are just starting this journey?
You have to minimize the noise. We talked
Slow
about this
down.
beforehand, that I cut subscriptions, cut unhealthy habits, cut the distractions, simplify and enjoy the simplicity. Learn how to enjoy the simplicity.
Mm,
Learn how to like make a salad at home as opposed to going out to that restaurant. Learn how to put your phone in a locked case for several hours in the evening and focus on specific tasks. So the simplification of stuff, of simplification of your life really forces you to focus. Think
yeah.
about I have lots of books, so this is a bad
Yeah.
example, but think of how many books you've bought that you haven't read. And then you go out to Barnes and Noble or Indigo and you get another book. Like you don't need that.
Right.
Or how many apps do you have on your phone? Do you really need all of those
I just
apps?
started clearing some apps off my phone today. It felt so good. I was like, I haven't touched it. Oh, maybe I'll go back. No, I haven't touched this app for like a year and a half at minimum. So what is it doing on my phone? I'm also running out of storage every day because I take so many photos of my dog. So like just
Right.
delete them.
Get rid
And
of that. Get rid of that.
now more like I feel so much more calm looking at my phone. It's amazing.
Shopping. How many purses really do you need? Like,
I don't have any purses now. It's fantastic. I have a magnetic wallet that goes on the back of this
awesome.
and or it goes in my pocket in my jacket. Otherwise I don't carry anything. So all my purses, if anyone lives in Austin, I'm moving apartments in 2 days and I have a whole closet full of stuff that I am donating. So,
This is timing. I know you're moving, and I'm telling you to purge stuff,
right?
to
Yes.
get the noise out, to really focus. Personal health. I'm a big believer in sleep.
Oh, I love
I
sleep.
have, and so I have my undergrad in neuroscience and background. I've got two boys, and I'm like, sleep all you want. That's your brain. Your frontal cortex needs development. You sleep, drink. Like I drink an obscene amount of water, and herbal teas. So personal health, weights, Achilles heel. I want to talk about it. Physical fitness. Yes, I need to get on that. Um, and focus in on yourself. And also, don't be afraid to like a big thing for me is questioning motives. So before, and this is trained as litigation, you tend to be reactionary, and you're trained to spot negative, see the negative,
Right.
catastrophize. It's risk management, right? And learning how to tone that down. I have to say, I give credit to my current place where I work. They've really helped me in terms of toning the litigator down.
Yeah.
But challenging yourself, and if you're confronted with a situation that or a person and it's negative, it may not be it's negative on its face, but if you go into their underlying purpose or their motivations for why they're doing it, you will find shared values.
Hmm.
There are extremes when it's not. People
Sure.
can be nasty and mean, but that's them releasing their own internal unhappiness. Um, the most aggressive litigators are the most unhappy. I wouldn't say not. That's a bad way of saying it, because the best litigators are aggressive and unangry.
Unangry, I love
Unangry litigators, yeah.
that.
So
Yeah, what I'm hearing too is, for anyone that's in dispatcher operations, no
mm,
matter what field you're in, but particularly in like the private jet industry where it's 24/7, right? It's not a scheduled flight. It's the phone is ringing, and so I must answer it because I need to change a permit, or maybe
yeah,
something broke and I need to swap out planes or whatever's going on. And that teaches you to always go into the what if and plan for 50 million scenarios so that you have a smooth process in the event that that needs to happen, and you win the day and you win the client and you make them happy, etc. But in your life, you cannot, we're not designed to do that all the time. We're not designed to be constantly scanning for what's going to go wrong in our lives. And so we need to have our own systems. Every person's going to be different, but learning what those are for you. And someone was talking about what's the opposite of what if, and they offered why not.
yes.
Ryan Lavarney is a friend of mine and another speaker, and what I offered as well, some that I came across from my personal Socrates book, was imagine if.
Mm,
Because why not is also great. Like, why not do this? But imagine if helps me particularly to tap into creativity and to go off into the realm of all the possibilities rather than like reasons why it shouldn't occur. And so that's really a really fun space to play in. So I invite everybody to do that.
I love that. I moved to how can, right? From lawyer was like, oh, I can't do that, you can't do that, you can't do that, to now I am, Department of yes, maybe. How can we do this?
Yeah,
Right.
I love that. Yes.
It-
Well,
it-
Philip is watching us live and he said thank you because it's very helpful to his recent career changes. So glad to hear that.
awesome.
Yes.
Philip.
um yeah, there's what, and this is the thing is you may not be going through a career change right now, but I can guarantee you will in your lifetime. The
Mm,
rate at which life changes is obscene now, right? With technology. I mean, even just looking at barely 100 years ago, flight was just discovered for humans, at least, right? And now last night at this technology showcase, Venus Aerospace had this card and took a picture of it, and their super cool space plane in 2030 is supposed to come online and take us anywhere in the world in 2 hours. Our children are going to look back and be like, you sat on an airplane for 16 hours to get somewhere. Gross. How?
right.
What? Like their minds are going to be blown that was ever a thing. And yet that is our reality today. But that won't be the reality forever. And so whether it's a technology shift, you decide you want to do something different, right? Your value systems have changed, how you want to live your lifestyles is going to shift. So these tools we're talking about, these mindset and reframes, they're going to be useful to you your entire life, and not even just while you're working, right? Because you're going to do something even after you stop maybe working for money. Who knows? Maybe money, we're going to stop all believing that money is the story that we're going to adhere to, and that's no longer going to be a thing in 40 years. I
Right.
mean, it's possible. It's the greatest story ever sold.
Yeah. Well, think about even us talking right now. Like, this wouldn't have happened 2019.
Oh my God,
Well, it could
no.
have, but like the hoops that we would have had to transition
Mhm.
pre-pandemic, right?
Yeah.
And even when we first connected, I wasn't with an airline, and now I'm with an airline. You're
Guess
Sarah the
what airline
Pivoter.
she's with?
It's
Say
called
it.
Pivot.
The Pivot Airline.
That's
That's
Sarah
so
the Pivoter.
amazing.
And when we talked, like, that wasn't on my immediate radar. And
Right.
then so much happens in a year. Um, I like it's exciting.
Yeah.
It's absolutely like I can't pinch me for what's happened in the past 14 months in my life.
Oh my
Not
gosh.
all good, not all
Yeah.
good. But even the bad stuff, I was like, I am a much better person for that garbage that I had to deal with. It's fine.
Garbage is a byproduct of life. There's always going to be things we need to take out and clean. And if we shift the way that we look at it as just being a necessary part of life, right, then we can, be like the fungi and just let it decompose and turn into rich fertile soil that can then grow the next thing. But
Yeah.
it's going to happen whether we like it or not. And a lot of suffering, a lot of pain that we experience, whether it's emotional or physical, is not wanting to accept reality for what it is.
Mm.
And when we can shrink that gap and we can simply just accept, okay, right now it's like this. This is happening.
An
Okay.
unwillingness to accept the message that's being delivered to you because you think you're in control,
Oh God,
but
no, we're not.
we're not in control. It is.
We ain't in control. Like, there's one thing that I have learned in my, 3.5 short decades on this planet is that there's just the illusion of
Yeah.
control. And even especially when I start to think like, yeah, I've got it all under control, and then it's like, whoop, no, you're not. Jokes.
Yeah. And then our like an insistence of like, no, I got it. I'm going to stay in this job. I'm going to push through. I'm going to stay in this relationship because I'm going to keep those apps on my phone. I've got to control status quo. No, let it go. We talk about surrender the message because the more you fight it, it's going to keep coming back to you in different ways until you actually get the message.
Yeah. My mom likes to tell this story. When I was, I don't know, maybe 9 or 10, we were in Mexico, we're snorkeling. The instructor's like, don't go over there. The current is really strong. You're going to get tired and you might be swept out to sea. Like, it's dangerous also. So what do I do? Because I want to go over there. I completely ignore him and I start to swim that way. And my mom says she just watched me and was like amused and, bewildered. Just watched me swim for about 20 minutes against this current, going like pretty much nowhere. I think I achieved like a meter of distance in this 20 minutes until I had no energy and I just let go. And the current brought me to her and she grabbed me and pulled me out of
Mm.
the current. And then we calmly swam over to the other thing, but she would always bring this story up to remind me, like, you can do that all you want, but in the end, you're gonna be so tired, you're gonna have to give up. So why don't you just save your energy and allow the current to take you where you need to go, and then, like, act like Crush and Finding Nemo, for those of you who love that movie, and use it to like propel you, and then, get out and do your thing. And of course, then when my mom would say it, I'd be really triggered and be like, you don't know anything, and I'm going to show you and I'm going to do it anyway. And finally, now I'm starting to listen.
It's the same trend with the instructor. Like,
Uh-huh.
you don't know about the current. I'm going to test this out. But
Yeah.
there's beauty in that too. Going against the establishment, going against authority to test it out, and you had a graceful failure.
Yeah. And I got caught in the end and it was great.
Yeah.
And, it's not saying that you can't, because again, it's there will be people who will say you can't do something. And then we also have to be realistic about, like, I can think all I want that gravity is not going to exist, but it does. Right. And so there's certain things that we have to accept about the world we live in. But we should give ourselves permission to play with the possibility and see what we can come up with, because that's where innovation comes from, right? Trying things that maybe are nonsensical but can come together in a way that never has before.
How we can. And it's not just engineering, it's in every occupation that anyone
Yes.
has. Any role that you're at, challenge the status quo. And you find that people either had never thought about it before, or they thought about it 5 years ago and they're like, well, didn't work. Okay, well, circumstances changed. Maybe we need to
Absolutely.
revisit now. The environment's different. Or you'll find that colleagues or partners have been like, I've been thinking about it, but I was too fearful
Mhm.
because it's too difficult. And maybe it's too difficult for this team, but we bring in a few others, we
Right.
can make magic happen. And that goes again to having the vulnerability and courage to ask the question. Can we do
Yes.
it? Can we do this something? Why? Or the alternative, like, why have you always been doing it this way? And I also
Mhm.
find like if something does not make sense to me, there's a problem. Or problem, it's a challenge. If something is not clear on its face logically, I was like, something's not making sense. And if it's not making sense to me, I can't explain it to somebody like they're
Right.
in grade 8. So that means there's something wrong. Something has to be, maybe
There's
it's
an
a minor tweak.
opportunity there.
Oh, anytime there's something wrong is an opportunity.
Yes.
100% believe in that. Yes. Everything that needs fixing is an opportunity. That's why I see AAM. It's like, it's just a giant $1 trillion market of opportunity because someone, a group of people realized, beholden to ground-based transportation
Mhm.
doesn't make any sense sometimes. So
Right,
how do we flying cars, how do we solve it? So the engineers did it. And now it's just, the ecosystem of lawyers and
right.
policymakers and getting everybody to weigh in to make it happen. But it will happen in our lifetime and sooner than anyone thinks. And it was people identified this is a challenge.
Yeah. And when we can embrace those challenges and create these opportunities, it often helps us to discover our purpose. A lot of people talk about purpose, and there are some people who know what their purpose is
Mm.
from a very young age. Awesome. But many of us need to trial and error a few things before we can find it. And it's really more of a discovery rather than a finding like, oh, I have it now, right?
Yeah.
It's going to evolve, and it's going to shift and grow as you do. Particularly when, as your point earlier in the show, we shift to the mindset of we, and we go into acts of service. Like, how can we do this, and how can this serve more than just me? Because selfish pursuits don't garner as much support. They don't garner as much funding. They don't garner, a lot of things. But as soon as we go into the is this going to do for us mentality, that's where purpose comes from. We hear these stories of people doing incredible feats in the face of danger and saving someone. And they ask them about their thought process, and it said, well, it was all about her or him or them. I thought about the other, and I just sprung into action. They weren't focused on like, well, what about me if I do that thing? It was like, we both need to win. So what does that require? And then they just did it. And so shifting our mindset to that is a really powerful way to discover purpose.
It would help with corporate health too, because the climbing the
Yeah.
corporate ladder is just looking out for oneself,
Right.
and you shift that
Kicking
perspective.
people off beneath you, right?
Right.
Peeling their fingers off at the top when they're
Yeah.
tired.
For what? For a title and more money for another vacation or another car or another toy or another outfit, but it's gonna end up causing you to be empty at the end.
Mhm.
And you might still like enjoy the process, but what's the purpose? And I like my purpose was again stripping away everything and going through a series of significant losses at the time, which I thought were unbearable for me. But that stripping away got me to know who I was
Mm,
and like truly at my core and what my gifts are, and turning towards a life of service of others
mm.
and focusing on, other people have these challenges. I love problem solving, and I'm not I don't have an engineering ring, but I have a advocacy and a communication ring, and I have a unique way of listening, not necessarily through traditional audio. We talked a little bit about that, but other ways of, my own skill set of listening deeply in a different way. And it was through that self-discovery of learning authenticity of that really honed in my purpose. And now every day is a joy. Well, I have this term at work. I initiated Monday meetings because I always initiate Monday meetings to beat what used to be called the Sunday scaries.
Right.
I don't have Sundays. I love Sundays. I love Mondays. I love every day of the week. I love
Yeah.
every day waking up and I'm like, even if it's going to be a complete circus the next day and things are going to go wrong, I love it. New day, next. Um, and I didn't always have that, because again, you're focused on I was so focused on getting this license, getting this job, becoming an effective advocate, becoming a litigator, building a client base, becoming partner at a law firm, like all of
Yeah.
these like steps that society said I needed to get. Society told me to be a mom, though that I'm like super happy about. That's the one thing. Um, but then, yeah, stripping that all away and then realizing, no, really, who am I at my core? What is my best gift? That allows me to find my purpose. And then as a result of that, every day's a joy. And part
Mm.
of it too is I want other people to experience what I get to experience. Now there's tears in closet days.
Yes.
Sure. Like I'm human. I do have
Same.
them, but the bounce back is pretty quick.
Yeah.
Um, Knock on wood again.
Well, and the thing is you allow yourself to have them as well. You're
Mm,
not shoveling this down into your pinky toe, as my ex-husband used to try to do. He's like, "If I ignore it long enough, then I don't have to deal with it, and I'm just gonna shove it down into my pinky toe." I was like, "That's not how it works."
yeah. You're gonna get a bunion is what
Yeah.
you're gonna get. It's like, yeah, you can't.
Um,
You gotta deal with it.
yeah.
Best time to also, like, eat crow is when it's fresh and dead. You just deal with the situation right away.
Yeah.
If you let it sit and fester, or you don't ask for help when you need it, the problem's going to get worse.
Yes. Absolutely. Um, oh, you just said something that triggered a thought, and then now it's
Something about your ex-husband's toe, maybe.
no, no, that's not what it was. He said something about the crows. Anyways, it'll come back if it's
Okay.
important. It'll come back into the sphere. Um, yes, it's important to process. Oh, I remember now. I was watching the dogs play during lunch today, and animals do this all the time. And they actually studied bears and animals, their nervous system response. So if there's whether they're playing or they're fighting, you'll notice if dogs are playing, then they often shake after, right? And the bears will do this as well, wild animals. So if they have an interaction where there's a winner and a loser, whether it's play or it's more of an aggressive fight, the one who loses, their nervous system carries out a physical response. So they shake, they
Mm,
shudder, like a dog that's shaking off water after it gets out of, a pool or a lake, and that is completing the loop. And then their nervous system calms down and they go back around their day, and
hmm.
they obviously don't have the same brain processes that we do, but they're not sitting there 2 hours later ruminating about that fight that they lost. They're
It's a Taylor
just
Swift song, isn't it?
in the moment. Yeah, shake it off. No, honestly, there's it's very powerful practice, and I'll actually guide
Mm.
people through it. I've done it at retreats, I've done it at corporate settings, and I'll put on a specific song, and I'll tell people, I'll invite them to close their eyes, and I'll guide them through. Every single person thinks the song is anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes. It is almost 9 minutes long. And after we're done, they're like, "Wow, I feel incredible." I'm like, "That's all you gotta do. Go put on a song, go shake it off, go dance, go punch a pillow." It's probably also something a lot of us need, speaking
Well, it's a
from
release of
experience.
energy. It makes sense because you can't destroy energy, and you've got this
You
negative
can only
energy.
transform it. That's all
Yeah,
you can do.
transform the energy through physical move or creative process or something else.
Yeah.
Transmute that.
I think it was who was it? It wasn't Matthew McConaughey. Maybe it was Matthew McConaughey. No, Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey talked about how when he was going through a lot of his process, especially when he was in deeper and darker depressions, he would just go to the studio and paint, and it would be his outlet to help him process and transform that energy. So whether that's poetry, whether it's
Mm,
painting, whether it's going to the gym, whether it's something physical with your hands, going and doing an obstacle course, or just going and sitting by the lake, right? Giving yourself that opportunity to be in a liminal space and to allow things to drop in and to come out and be used in a different way. We live way too much of our lives up here in this intellectual process, and that's not how the world works. The world is physical. It's something that we have to move through. And so if we just live up here all the time, we don't move that energy out of us, then it starts to accumulate. Like, think of it like plaque in your arteries, right? You're not going to see it.
yep.
You're not even going to feel it. But eventually it's gonna get you. And once you have that heart attack, the proverbial heart attack, it's hard to get back to full health after that. So take care of yourself now, do the things now. Hard now, easy later.
Yeah, transmute that energy. That's exactly what we started also talking about. Like you're just
Yeah.
distracting with more apps or on your phone all the time. Deal with the problem head on. And you talked about poetry, which is near and dear to my heart too. And I think about Maya Angelou, like her first book on poetry was so she could deal with her childhood trauma, and she
Mm,
used poetry as a creative expression to find herself and heal herself. Some people use sport to do that. Some
mhm.
people, I think, writing. I use my work
Yeah,
is my love to do what I need to do for self-expression, and turning negativity and animosity in courtrooms or boardrooms or challenges, figuring out the light in the darkness
yeah,
and shining and building that light up.
yeah.
That's my process of
Well,
doing
when you're the light, you become the lighthouse for other people
it.
so that they can navigate to a safer, more stable ground. And
Right.
if you try to take that light out into the storm, then both of you are lost potentially, right?
And lessons I've learned that, like, it doesn't work for everybody. Some
Mm-mm.
people are on the path I was like, "You're not gonna ever see my lighthouse. I can't. It's
Right.
gonna come from somebody else." And that was also like, I have a challenge, I can solve it. I can challenge, I can solve it. And then realizing there are certain challenges that are just, could I do it? But it's not meant for me and it's not meant for that person.
Yeah.
They're on a different journey. And I like seeing it, I can see it a lot clearer now. Or that others, I'm like, "Ooh, I got you. I see exactly what needs to be done. Let me in and help." And it's not a quick fix. And I've also, for people go to lawyers all the time for advice, and I'm very firm in my belief that the person, the individual, the entity that knows the truth, that knows the answer, is the client themselves, is the person. My goal is to tease it out
Yeah.
in a way that, and sometimes it takes a long time because I know it's in there. The truth is always in there. It's in the person, it's in the entity. And the goal of a good lawyer is, I'm not going to tell you, I can tell you the options or the risk,
Yeah.
but it's asking the questions that the other person on the other side of the table has that self-discovery moment. Like, "Oh, I never asked my that. I never thought about that." And all options have to be canvassed, even like the unpopular, uncomfortable ones.
Yeah.
Even though like, "Well, that doesn't work." Okay, but let's at least put it on a piece of paper and table it. That's the
Absolutely.
goal. Yeah.
I feel like we could talk for hours.
Mhm.
We're already coming up on our time, so I want to pivot
Yeah.
ourselves to the questions that I like to ask all my guests.
Okay.
And we might have to do a part two series to this episode.
Okay.
So my first question I always like to ask is, what are your superpowers?
My superpowers. I've got a few. Big one is connecting.
Mm.
So connecting places, people, ideas. Someone once said sort of string theory
Mhm.
brain. I don't like string theory because it's sort of off there for in physics, but being able to connect. So it's a systems way of thinking. So that to
Ah,
me
yeah.
is a superpower. So I'm able to, it allows me to predict sort of outcomes accurately with
Mhm.
partial information, partial data. I can recognize risks and opportunities that others overlook and problem solve. And that stems from a disability of not being able to pick up audio in a certain way and coming up with different ways of understanding and learning. So I would say connecting. And I got two superpowers. I got one superpower in 2011, and another superpower in 2015, and they're playing video games downstairs. But I say I got my first superpower in 2011, and then the other one leveled me up.
I love it.
So those are two additional. So I have three superpowers. So two young boys and my ability to connect. There's a few other ones too, but
Yeah,
those are my big ones.
I love it. That's so great. What may I ask what these games are?
The video games that they're
Yeah.
playing, I
Yeah.
have no clue. I assume that they're approved, parental appropriate. Like there's other kids on that they're playing with them. So Roblox, I don't really. I
Yeah.
just give them the card and then they talk with other people and they play video games after school. So those,
Yeah.
but that's a whole other talk about working and being a sole provider and having two
Yeah.
kids, and that's another whole other conversation. But it's doable and the joy
Yeah.
of my life. So
I love that. Thank you.
yeah.
Now, when we go through life, we often come up on decisions where maybe we're not sure of what answer we want to we need to get to, or what we really want. So we go to other people to get a perspective, or we filter our thinking through somebody's perspective. So I call like this your personal board of directors. And this can be a person that's actually in your life. It can be
Mm,
someone that you don't know, but you use their thinking or their mindset, their
mm.
philosophy to filter your answers. So it can be someone from the past, someone that's current. It could be a fictional character, an avatar. Um, who are those people in your life on your personal board of directors?
That's a great question. I hadn't even thought about if there's someone that has influenced me and guides my answers. I'm gonna have to give that particular some more thought. On my board of directors, there's always space.
Mm.
There's always space for one or two more. So if people are listening, like, "Oh, I want to be on your board. I want to give you some earworms." There's space for you. Currently, and it changes. I don't
Yes.
always want the same board of directors that are guiding me. It needs to be changed. I would say currently, um, in my role with an airline, it's every single person that I work with,
Mm.
right? I'm, servant leadership, I'm there for them. They're teaching me. across
Mhm.
all departments. So the beauty of being in-house with an airline is I get frontline with dispatch and flight attendant and maintenance and engineering and finance and corporate, like I get it all. And every single individual is so valuable to me in what they've taught me um, about their craft,
Yeah.
about the love of what they're doing, who they are, and challenged me to think about deploying advocacy and legal skills differently. So I would say currently, and I hope this continues on, my current board of directors is fairly large and over 50 people right now, but it's every single individual that I have the privilege of saying I'm chief of staff over. Um, the love and heart of everybody I work with is just immeasurable, a dream job to say the least. So I would say currently it's every single person I work with is a board of directors, and every input that they have is valuable to me, to some of my CARES clients as well. When we talk about CARES, I talked about the airline, but CARES clients is also, I learned from that, and invaluable to me as a human being and how I view my self-worth. So and this is true of like corporate board of directors,
Yeah.
if you're the chair or you're on the board of the directors and your board of directors is not making you see your own self-worth, you're on the wrong board.
Yeah.
It's not just about the company, it's about the people in the company at all levels. So if my goal, if I'm working with someone who is at the bottom end of the pay scale and I want them to go up, I'm not doing my job unless they're learning how to see their intuitive self-worth. And if you're at the
Mm.
highest level of the C-suite and you're on the board and that board is not doing things so you recognize your self-worth, then you're not on the right board, you're not in the right company. If all they're doing is dragging you down, because it's easy to pull that balloon down as opposed to let it up. If you keep getting
Right.
pulled down, you're in the wrong spot. And it may suck to make that decision, being like, I have to leave this board, I have to lose this financial position. But at the end of the day, you got to look yourself in the mirror and act with the utmost level of integrity through the hardship. And that's the courage.
Mm. Yes, I love that. What a great reminder that just because it's something that served us at one point may no longer serve us. And even though it might appear prestigious on paper, it takes courage. So it takes courage to let go of it.
Yeah.
But ultimately, you have to act in service of yourself so that you can be of service to others.
Yeah. 100%.
Okay. My final question is, imagine there's an intelligent species, alien life form that comes to Earth, and you are the first person, Catherine, that they
Okay.
interact with. So, what do they learn about humanity because they've met you?
Um, well, I'm representative of humanity in that I'm a deeply flawed person that struggles daily. But notwithstanding that, I embody the inherent belief of progress for the greater good. And if I feel that way, so does everybody else.
Mm.
And there's some darkness that holds them back, but we are, what was it? It's that you would know that space shot, the moon, Earthrise.
Earthrise, yes, yeah. And
Earthrise,
Apollo 8?
Apollo 8, Apollo
Yeah.
8. So, or the pale blue dot
Mhm.
photo, right? The light and the darkness that you see in this vast darkness, pale blue dot, which is Voyager 1, NASA. We talked about NASA today. Um, the representation of light and darkness and constantly trying to find that. So despite our flaws, despite our struggles, we all have a common thread. Every
Mm.
single human being, like, is there evil in the world? Yeah, they're evil problems, not evil people. They're acting maybe in ways that they shouldn't for other reasons, but they inherently are not. All humans are the same. We all look
Mm.
the same, skeletons on the inside. We are all deeply flawed. We are all struggling in different ways, but every single, I have to believe this, in humanity believes in progress for the greater good.
Yes, I would agree with you. Thank you. That is a wonderful reflection. And you just made me think of this book that I am currently listening to and that I highly recommend for everybody
Awesome.
called No Bad Parts
Oh,
by Richard Schwartz. It's the internal family systems
yes.
philosophy and used in many circles in psychology and psychotherapy. And it's about accepting all parts of yourself. So rather than trying to reject or make wrong or get rid of something that you don't like within yourself, accepting it and integrating that into your whole self and then operating from that place. And he does a lot of work also with people in the prison system and people in, like really extreme cases. and understanding like why those parts exist. And so very often these parts that pop up within ourselves are simply trying to protect us from something that occurred
Yeah.
previously. And so they, came online to save us from experiencing intense pain or intense emotional pain. And so now they're running the show. And when we make them wrong or we try to reject them, we are making it worse because they're just trying to do their job to help you. When we
Mhm.
start to accept them and work with them, we can give them a new job and they're no longer running the show. And so it's a really, really powerful work. I really highly recommend people give it a listen or give it a read.
Awesome. Here,
Amazing.
my dog agrees too. Sounds like a
Yes,
good book.
see, she gave us the affirmation earlier in the call. Now she's like, "Yes, yes, humans, go read that book.
Yeah.
I'm an emotional support animal." Stats is probably like,
If
"Thank
anyone's
God,
got
mom."
the most intuition, it's not me, it's her.
Yeah,
She's got
Stats
it.
is probably like, "Thank God you're listening to that, mom." Like, yeah, emotional support human. She's like, "I need
Right,
one of those." Okay,
right.
amazing. Well, Catherine, I really appreciate you being on the show with me today. Thank you so much. I look forward to talking with you more. And if people would like to find out more about who you are, what you do, what's the best place for them to look you up?
Connect with me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best. I'm pretty far behind on some of my messages, but shoot me a note. I will get to you eventually. That's probably the best way. So, and yeah, my website's there. There's a form you can fill it out. You'll get directly to an email system that will take you into. So that's the
Amazing.
best way. Sarah, it's been a
Amazing.
pleasure. I'll always love connecting with you and our
Yeah.
shared journey in aviation. It's great.
Same here. Yes, we have many, many parallels, and I look forward to hearing more about Pivot Airlines. So thank you for being with me here today.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah.
You're welcome. And for everyone who's watching, whether you're watching this now live with us or later, thank you so much. If you enjoyed this episode, please remember to like and subscribe on YouTube, share it with your friends, tag them in the comments. And next week, I will have Cody Bogart with me in the lounge, another female in aviation who's also written several children's books. So really looking forward to having her on the show. We'll see you next week.